Cool. So first topic we're going to go over today is a review on semantic HTML. And I'm going to do that as a demo setting up the content on my homepage for my index.html file and project. If you would like to follow along as I do this right now, great. If you'd like to just watch and listen, that's also great because this is being recorded. You can always pull up a YouTube video and follow along with me after. Maybe you absorb it better watching and then doing it alongside me. It's nice to get to pause me. So you have options there. I will not be like, what are you doing if you're not actively writing code during this demo. And also after we go over what we have to go over today, I will have time and bandwidth to meet with people and make sure that things are working. Like, let's say code spaces isn't working for you and you're worried about that. Like, we can talk about it. Like, if it's not working right now, you don't have to stop the lecture. I can make time for you. It'll be all good. Okay. So remember last time we're on this page. This is our repository page. It shows me my files. It shows me my little README markdown file, but it's not my actual website. If I want to work on my website, I have to press this green button that says code. And then once I hit code, it'll say code spaces, your workspaces in the cloud. And I already have a code space that I started last week. I can just keep working there. So I'm just going to click on its name. It named mine bug-free palm tree. That's in fact how I like my palm trees. So that works out for me. And it takes me into my index.html file. It might say that it's setting up your remote connection, starting your code space. You're just going to give it a second while it does that. No big deal. Okay, and I'm here. Now, as a reminder for what we did last class, I'm going to go ahead and fill in my head like you guys were supposed to. So if you didn't get a chance to yet, this is an opportunity to. So one thing that might be helpful for me is to look at my wireframe when I'm doing updates to the content of my site. So I have my wireframe I worked on last week open already. I know that I need to go to my mouse. I'm actually going to utilize a tool in Figma that makes it really easy to copy content. We'll use this a lot more when we're getting into CSS, but it's even helpful right now for HTML. Up in this top corner, your top right corner, next to the share button, there's this little like code looking icon. And if you click it, it's going to take you into developer mode. And wow, there's so much nonsense around developer mode now. It used to not be this complicated. Anyway, developer mode makes it pretty easy to copy and paste your content out of your wireframes and out of your mockups. So I can click on the name of the item I have there, and then over here, it'll show my thing. And if I just click on the text over here in the inspect tool, it copies that text to my clipboard. And so that's the name of my website. So I'm just gonna paste that in my title tag. And I'll also go back over to my Figma file and I'm going to use this as my description. I'm just going to click on the words over here in the inspect panel. I'll pop back over here and paste that as my description. You can also just handwrite your description. You don't have to use this method. I'm just doing it so it's a little easier for me. Remember, your title is what shows up here in your tab. Your description is like if you had a Google results of your website, what would show up underneath the website's title. Author, you're going to put your own name. My own name, Shauna. Whoa. My favorite thing about teaching is it challenges my ability to spell and type more and more every day. Shauna Keep. Wow. Great. I have my little favicon. You probably made a custom one last week, and then it's linked to my style sheet. So that's my head. Remember, every HTML file is in between two HTML tags. All of your content that's getting, all of your assets that are getting loaded onto the page, and meta information, like information you're giving to the browser about your website, is in the head. And then today, what we're going to talk about is the body tag, which is where the content that actually outputs on the screen lives. But before I do that, see, I'm over here in my source control panel in GitHub. And you'll see it's noticed that I've made some changes to my HTML file. And before I move on to an entirely separate task, I'm gonna make sure I make a commit. So I'm gonna say populates head content And this doesn't show up anywhere on your web page. It just shows up in GitHub in your commit history. So it's like notes to you about what you did when you were working on your website. So I'm going to say commit, and then I'm going to push that up. And now that's saved to my repository properly. So now I'm going to move on to working on a different task that's going to get a different commit. And that's going to be filling in my page content of my HTML body tag. So remember, we got our HTML tag, which the whole website lives inside of. We got head, which we just did, and body, which is the stuff we actually see on the screen. So I'm going to remove some of my placeholder content because I won't be needing it right now. I don't think I want this copyright thing, so I'm just going to take it out. And so now I'm left with what I refer to as like my main semantic HTML elements. I spoke to you about this in a past lecture that for a long time we didn't actually have these. Like when I took this class back in the day, 10 years ago, these were all in these kinds of information all lived in what are called divs. And div is still a thing that's out there in the world. It's a very useful HTML element, but it's basically just like an all-purpose container element. It doesn't actually output anything on the page. It's kind of handy for doing CSS styles. And you'll still see me maybe use them sometimes in this particular website. Maybe I will, because I quite prefer to use these semantic HTML elements. The reason for that is if everything was div, it'd be very hard to tell it apart or know what's in there. It makes the code file kind of hard to read. So I like utilizing these different HTML elements. They also, like a div, they're just container elements. They don't output anything on the page, but they have value to you when you're working on your code file. And they also have value to folks that might be using the web in non-traditional ways, like maybe people that don't use a keypad and a mouse. Maybe we have non-sighted users who are using a screen reader. When you utilize these different HTML elements, it makes it much easier for the screen reader to read the page for our non-sighted user. It also, if something is really important to your client, is something called SEO or search engine optimization. If they want their site to come up on Google, sites that utilize semantic HTML well tend to do better in search results rankings. And so you'll also see different clients and different companies want you to use HTML for that reason. So basically, they could be kind of helpful for you as a human to just like read your code file and for passing your code file off to other humans, maybe. Like I, in my life, very rarely ever work on a coding file by myself. But also makes it easier for robots to read your web page and be able to do stuff with it without you having to do nearly as much work. So that's why those things have value. So I'm gonna, as I go through my page and fill in stuff and grab stuff from my wireframe, I'm gonna kind of explain what that element is. And y'all already have these elements in your starter file, so you don't need to remember them off the top of your head or anything. This is more about understanding what they are and how to use them. So there are three main container elements on an HTML page if you're using semantic HTML correctly. Your first one is header. Header is all the things that go at the top of your page. Like your navigation is going to live inside of your header. Let me pull up an example. I'll just use a new call website. So like in this website, what's probably in the header for sure is this like blue bar up top is on most of their top level pages. Yeah. So this blue bar, this white bar, and the page title. Those all live in the same element. That if I was writing this web page, I would wrap everything up here in a header. You'll also notice that what's in the header generally stays the same on every page if you're using it correctly. When you get, oh my God, nightmare. Don't let ResLife ever be in charge of anything. Jesus. Some of these are like sub websites of new halts that they change the way the website works. But in general, the principle follows, especially when you're working on a small scale site, especially when you're working on a really big website, is to keep the patterns across every page the same or similar. So you'll sometimes hear people talk about components, which are like repeatable designs to use on every page. Your header is probably going to be a repeatable component. So when you eventually build out the rest of your web pages, the top part of them will probably look the same on all of them. So that's why doing a multi-page website isn't as scary as it sounds, because your header is probably going to be pretty much the same. It might have a logo and like your navigation links, but it'll just repeat on all your pages. So inside of my header, most headers are going to have a nav element, which is navigation. Navigation is like these links up here you use to get around the website. They're like the other pages. So in your website, you'll probably have like a logo and then the names of your other pages. So I'll have a navigation that has rinks, skate parks, and trails in it. So I can go ahead and add those in now. Well, I'm in the wrong place. So instead of saying link, I'm going to say rinks. I'm going to say trails. Well, I love typing. So you're gonna put your names of your other pages that are not your home page in these, basically. And then I'll say skate parks. I love spelling. Okay. And then I probably also though need to have a link to my home page that goes on all my other pages. So I'm gonna add another link up here. And I'm not gonna put that in my nav. It is not quite the same as my nav. I'll do. So when you write a link, which is what these A things are, so it's like this would be an A tag. If your mouse turns into a little pointy finger, and if you can click on it and something happens, it's a link. I couldn't tell you why the thing for links is A, but it sure is. So we roll with it. And our link is actually the first HTML element you'll see that has this thing called an attribute. Some of our stuff up here has attributes, like anything that's red with blue in quotes, that's an attribute, that's an attribute, that's an attribute. href is an attribute. href tells the link where to link to, what page is it going to. Right now, since we only have one page, and up to midterm, we're just gonna have one page, you don't actually have to worry about what's in that quotes for now. But later on, we'll be adding in the names of our other HTML files, because that's how you link HTML files. You do A tags, and then their href will be like, let's say I have a rinks.html page and a trails.html page and a skateparks.html. They're gonna go there. But for now, we're gonna leave it alone, except for my homepage link. I already have a homepage, so I can do index.html. When I test that, it won't actually go anywhere because it's a web page I'm already on. But for the sake of repeatable components, even though I'm on my homepage and says link to my homepage, later on when I set up my other pages, I can just copy and paste the header onto all of them, and the nav will work on all of my pages, which is very nice. So I'm going to write home inside of that. But really, what I should be putting here long term, and if I had had a different week than I did, I would have made like a little logo or something for it, but my week went in a way I did not expect, and sometimes it'd be like that. So for now, I'm just gonna write home. Maybe next week I'll make a little roller skate icon or something, so that way we kind of follow. A lot of folks expect this pattern. You'll notice this on a lot of websites, that in your upper left-hand corner you have like a logo, and if you click on it, it goes to the home page. That's a pretty like well understood pattern for a lot of users. And sticking with patterns users already understand are like easy wins for usability that you don't have to put a lot of effort into. So that's why I'm going to add that little homepage link. I'll eventually style it so the homepage link is an image and it goes over there, and my navigation links are on the other side. So now I have a header, which is that repeatable top element of all of my pages. Oh, look, it'll even give you documentation about it if you hover on it. That's crazy. Love getting that spaces. So if you're like, what is this? You can just hold your mouse on it and it'll tell you all about it. And it looks like it'll even link you to a MDN reference for it. So that's great. That website's very helpful. So if you're ever confused about what an element is, need a reminder, you can just hover on it and it'll tell you. It's great. Okay, so next element I'll talk about is main. Main is where the content on your page that's different from all of your other pages is going to go. So like if I go back to the New Paltz website as my example, Like this is their homepage, but if I go to academics, majors and minors, what's underneath this part where it says undergraduate catalog, like this page content that changes when I switch pages, but actually it might be over here, that's the main. It's the stuff that's different on each page, basically. So generally, all your repeatable content that is at the start of your page can go in your head, but then once you get into stuff that's different on each page, you're gonna go into your main. So in the case of my website, it probably stops being different once I get past my navigation. So my navigation is what lives probably from like here and up. And so probably what's different is I'm gonna probably not put this on every single page of my whole website, the title of the website, because that'd be really competitive, especially if I have a logo for it. So I'll start with that. Copy that, and I'm gonna start filling this content in. So I'm gonna do one of our header elements. And generally a good header element to use for the name of your site, but for the biggest header that's going to be on your page is your header 1, H1. And so I'm gonna paste the name of my website in that H1, and it is going to output on the page for me. I currently don't have it figured out which extension I need to be using to output my code preview. I promise I will figure that out for next class. I'm also new to code spaces. We'll get it. But for now, I'm just putting an H1 inside of my main as the name of my website, because that's also what I have in my mockup, that I have the name of my website there. Then the next thing I have on my website that's probably not going to be the same thing on every page is I'm going to have an image. I don't know what image I'm going to use yet, but that's okay. So but I'm going to put an image tag in there as a placeholder for now. The image tag in HTML is a little bit different than your other tags. You'll notice most of our tags, they have an opening tag. So I have H1 and /H1. I have main and I have /main. But for image, you don't do that. Thank you, Stanley. It was beautiful. For image, it's actually what's called a self-closing tag, meaning I open it and I close it in the same tag. So I do img, and then at the end I do / before my caret. I actually never have a closing image tag at all. But your image tag has 2 attributes that you must use. One is the src tag, the src attribute, not tag, and the src attribute is where the image is coming from. So maybe for my intents and purposes right now, I'll be like person roller skating. No, go away. I was like, oh, that's stunning. What a great roller skater. This is also a sketchy way to get an image link. Don't do this. Copy link. No, I actually need to copy image address. Because now I'm just relying on Skate World to keep that image up on their website. I don't know them, so I don't know if they'll actually do that. So don't do that. But it's where your link to your image is actually going to go. You're going to be dropping your images really into your repository and just putting the file name, which will also just be easier and less crazy looking. But for my purposes right now, you can paste your image link into the quotes after your src. Find browser where that image lives, because all images need to be posted. The other attribute I absolutely must give an image is the alt attribute. The alt attribute is what was initially designed as an accessibility feature. It's so somebody who is not sighted is navigating the web page and they hit an image element. And so they still get information about what that image element contains because they can't see. But for the reason why it's so much so required, even if you absolutely no non-sighted users in your audience, is let's say my internet connection is really crappy and my images didn't load. I'd get like that little broken piece of paper icon, and then what outputs after it is whatever you put in the alt tag. So you're still conveying to your user, if they can't see the image for whatever reason, even if it's just temporary, what's in there. So I actually thought about this a bit when I was doing my initial wireframe, that it's an image of a person skating. So that's what I'm going to put there. I'm going to say person roller skating. That you're describing the image to the user, and you try to think about how it might be relevant to them. When you add a logo in, you're going to put like whatever the text, like it's an image of text, you're gonna put whatever the text says in the image, that's critical. But when it's a photograph, you just have to provide a description of that image. There's also, if you're somebody who hates doing alt text description, there's a lot of like pretty good like AI tools out there that you can use as a starting point, like, hey, what's this picture of, and let it tell you why reinvent the wheel, but also edit it if it seems kind of not right. You can also just on your own, which is what I'm doing here. So now I have my main element for my home page. I'm looking at my design. I have this name. I have my image element. I have all my links in my navigation, and I gotta add this like secondary heading I have. And so that I'm gonna put in a. Great. I will move my main down that way. I'm gonna hit tab, so I'm still inside of my main. So I'm gonna put it in an H2, which is still a heading, but just like a smaller one. I could also put in a paragraph element if I wanted to, but this is information that's not as high priority as the name of the website. So I'm gonna put in H2. And so I'm gonna paste that content from my Figma. Remember, I put myself in dev mode so that when I click elements, I can just click on the text of that element to copy the text, so I don't spend an eternity retyping it out. And now I have pretty much all of my content from my page inside of my indexed HTML. The last semantic HTML element that is in here is the footer element. I think in the starter website file, it has like a copyright date. You can use it, you cannot use it, you can do whatever you want with it. But the footer element behaves quite similarly to the header element. It is where you're putting like repeatable content that would go at the bottom of every page. You might decide you don't want to have any content that repeats the bottom of every page, and you might even just say, I don't need it, and do it. That's fine. I usually leave it because sometimes I end up coming with the reason for it. I find on websites that are larger, or by social media links that correspond with my website, I tend to put those in the footer. And generally, if you're putting a lot of links, you actually can use another navigation for it. Because navigation element's useful because it tells like robots that might visit your page, like a site crawler or a screen reader, that this is an element that contains a lot of links. So you can use a nav element, but it's also not absolutely critical the way I would say that it is with your header and your like entire website's navigation. Does that make sense? The semantic HTML stuff. Pretty simple, right? Pretty straightforward. Cool. Well, now that I have made changes to my page and I'm happy with them, I'm going to once again make a commit. I'm going to say fills in body content or homepage. Remember, this is just notes for me. It's just for me to know what I did and then make sure I hit the sync button after I've staged my commit. And now if I go back out into my repo, like where I was before, and I refresh the page, instead of last week, next to my index, look, it says now, it was last updated now. And it shows my commit message from my most recent commit. And now as I keep working, can I look at my commit history on me? No, that'd be too easy. An easy way to look at it anywhere. I need to work on that. So that's what your goal is with your code for the next week. Just fill in that body tag with the content you have in your wireframes. You might not know what images you're using exactly yet. So if you don't know yet, just use a blank image SRC equals and just don't put anything in the SRC yet. And maybe if you have an idea of what you might want it to be, put it inside the alt text with the description of what that might be. Yes. I find sometimes, especially if you're going from wireframe to design, filling in your HTML might help you identify gaps and things you didn't figure out. Like for me, as I was doing this, I realized I never left a placeholder for a logo or anything. And so I'm going to make sure I leave it in for myself about that. Even if it's just like an arbitrary like little circle and I'm putting some text on it that says logo. Well, I'm a great scholar. So kind of help you identify gaps in your content before you even move into design. Is that good? Is everyone on the Zoom with me? Cool. Everyone in the room? No one's feeling lost? Okay. Cool. Well, then we'll move into the next part of this, which will be a little bit less challenging because it's in a program. We're not learning new programs today. We're sticking with what we got, which is we're going to continue working right here in Figma. So I now have my wireframe for my site done for my homepage. That's pretty good. I got my navigation elements figured out. I know what my homepage content is going to be. It might end up changing later, but that's okay. Trying to decide. Yeah, okay. So I think I'm gonna do is if up here in the top corner of your like layers and assets panel, there's a thing that says page 1. And if you double click on it, I accidentally renamed it W. Oh, please. Okay. If in the pages panel, when you open it, you can name your page thing. So I'm gonna call mine wireframes. Because later on, I'm gonna go into wireframes for my 3 other pages here. But I also don't want to make a new Figma document to do my designs because that seems kind of extra to me. So I'm gonna make sure the pages panel is open and I'm gonna hit new page. And I'm gonna say mockups. And so now I have my wireframes and I have mockups. I'm gonna say that's mobile mockups specifically. And then I'm gonna add another one that's mockups desktop, because I'm gonna do mobile mockups and desktop mockup. I'm gonna put them on different pages because later on I'm gonna have more pages for these mockups, my other site pages. And Figma has the opportunity to do something called prototyping, which is like simulating the website experience. And you'll start putting your wireframes into your prototype if they're not on separate pages. So that's why I've made this wireframes page, mockups mobile, mockups desktop, and that's over here. The pages panel, we're gonna hit the plus button to add those pages. My wireframes are on this first one, and I'm gonna make my way over to this second one. So I don't get totally lost, and so I can refer to my wireframe. I'll probably delete this later. I'm gonna paste a screenshot of it for my own reference. And just like before, I'm gonna create a new frame. And I'm gonna do a frame for Android large, because that's the closest thing to the phone I have. This is more critical in your mockups than it was in wireframes. If you own a iPhone 13, then use the one that's an iPhone 13. If you own a Google Pixel, maybe just go for Android large. It's not that deep, but it can help. Because as you work on your design, you can actually open it up on your phone and it will, like, as you're working on the design, update in real time. You can see how big stuff is, like, actually on a phone screen, which can be a really helpful design tool. So I've added a frame to my mockups mobile page. I've added a little preview screenshot from my wireframe page so I can look at it. And I'm going to call this frame home because it's my home page. And I'm going to put the hand tool on so I can drag around. And this is just going to be, okay, great. So the difference between wireframes and mockups. Wireframes, like I said last time, you're just doing black and white. You're just worrying about your content. You're not thinking too much about like the visual, actual look and feel of things. You're not picking fonts. You're not doing images in your wireframes, but in mockups you are. Like you're gonna start getting an idea of what you really want this thing to look like. So over the course of the next week, you might pick these colors. You might end up drawing a little logo for what you're doing. So on and so forth. So I'm going to be a little bit more intentional about this. Does that confuse anybody? Anyone confused with the difference between mockups and wireframes? Don't worry about it in your wireframes. Like if you're no, don't worry about colors, don't worry about what font you're using, like just like a simple sans serif, it's good for your wireframes, and you get to have more fun with it as well as in this one. So I'm going to start making things that are more design happen. So I lost the view of my thing I was working on. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to do a page title, set name of my website, just like I was doing before. And I'm going to highlight it and make it bigger. And I'm going to show you some more stuff in the design panel. So over here from the recap of Figma, all of like the organization of layers and pages and stuff is over here on the left-hand side. And then over here, we have our design and prototype panels. And for what we're doing now, we're going to be using the design panel quite a bit. Up top here, we have a bunch of stuff for like alignment and distribution. Most of this stuff is alignment. If you hit this little drop down, it'll do stuff for distributing items. If you've ever been to the object align panel in Illustrator, it'll be your friend. There's some stuff about like its X position, its Y position, its width, its height, all that kind of stuff you normally would see in your Adobe programs. There's some stuff about constraints. I wouldn't worry about that too much as a beginner. There's layer blend modes. And then depending on what element you have selected, you'll see different panels here. So since I've added text, it's showing the text panel. So this is where I can go on in and change my fonts and stuff like that. A lot of what shows up here is available as Google fonts. And I would, before you commit to a specific font, go on Google Fonts. Which is fonts.google.com, and you can kind of use different filters and stuff. I'm going to put the name of my website in so I can kind of preview what it looks like in Google Fonts before I pick something. Are you all right? You're distracting them. Here, we're going to show them Google Fonts. All right. So he's here. He's being distracted. So now he gets to distract the Zoom. Okay. Great. Okay, so I'm here in Google Fonts. I'm at fonts.google.com because I want to make sure that I don't pick a font here in Figma that I don't have access to. So I find a good path is to look at what you like on Google Fonts and then see if it exists in Figma. It will make your life a little bit easier. If there is a font in Google Fonts that you really want to use that is in Figma, just sub in something else, and it's fine to just load a different font on your actual website. But just know, not everything that shows up in Figma as a font option is actually available for web font use. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Even if you find something here that you love and you really want to use, you can just like leave a note in your mock-ups like, I'm going to use this font. It just wasn't available in Figma. There are tools to install fonts on Figma. I'm going to be honest with you, I've never figured out how to use them correctly. So why would I make you? Let's see. That's fine. I'm going to sort it by, I'll make it bigger. And then I'm going to do display font, I think. I want to find like a pretty one for doing my site headers and stuff. And then I'm going to, I'll probably end up changing this later, but just for the sake of the demo right now. So many fonts here. I'm going to be crazy and use this one. So Handjet is its name. Let's see if that exists in Figma. Yeah, it does. Like Figma has like a lot of fonts. And so it's definitely the easiest route to pick from Google Fonts and then just see if they have it in Figma. So let's say I want to use this like cool pixely one for my site. And I can also go in here to fill and I can pick out my color I want to start with. Maybe I'll do this nice blue to start. Believe it or not, I really like the color blue. I don't know if you do. So that's cool. And then I still gotta find a picture. And then I'll go back into that in a minute. I think I need to go through my skate Instagram and like find it. I'll just probably use pictures that are mine because I really skate all the time. And then I have Hudson, Valley, skaters. But this is gonna be an H2, not an H1, so I don't want it to be quite that big. And maybe this is where I should use like a more legible font. In general, when you're picking fonts, you wanna keep it to 2 font families. Like, I'll probably have like a more decorative font I use for headers, and then like a sans serif I use for copy. So I'm gonna uncheck display and do sans serif. And maybe I'll use, I like Rubik, let's do Rubik. So I'll type in Rubik. Oh, I replaced my content and not the font query. Why would you do that to me? Okay. Over here, picking my font, I'm gonna say Rubik. Good. And then I'm gonna bring my font size down a bit, maybe not that small, this is still a heading. And I'm gonna make that be purple, apparently, that's fine. And then maybe for the sake of our time right now, I'll use an emoji as my icon. Roller skate little emoji. I know that is open sourced. I'll just use a literal computer emoji for the time being, because that is in fact allowed. But it might just change in different operating systems. So I'm gonna use that as my icon for now. But because it's coming in as a font, because it's an emoji, so it's something you type, I actually have to make it bigger and smaller over here, which is a little obnoxious, which might be why it might be better to bring stuff in as image assets. So I'll put that there, I'll bring that down, just bigger, now I'm seeing it. Yeah, that's cool. So I'll do that, it's my website's kind of ugly right now, that's fine, it's just for demonstration purposes. I'll get my life together a bit more next week. I'm gonna steal my hamburger that I made last time. Oh my god, Stanley, what are you eating? I like this hamburger. I'm just gonna copy it, so I don't have to make the 3 lines again. And that's pretty good. Also here in Figma, whenever you're picking a color for something, you get the option to do a solid color, an image fill, or a gradient. Avoid gradient fill on text. It's very hard to achieve consistently with CSS. But on like borders, background fills, anything like that, free, go for it. You're totally allowed to have a good time. There's a color picker when you're doing your gradient. You can grab stuff like out of an image if you want to. You could just do it over here in your regular color thing. It looks like the transparency set really low. And so like I can actually make my, it's really hard to, those 2 colors were not the vibe because it makes it really hard to tell. Let me do like purple to like red maybe, or are they too similar? Maybe I just do it to pink right now. Or is it really that hard to tell? Oh, it's because it's a vertical gradient on like something that's this tall. I should change the angle of this gradient. How do I do that? It's a fun little adventure every day. Okay, there's definitely a way. Well, that lets me choose between radial or angular. Might just not be the thing to do it on. You can see it somewhat changing. But normally you're able to like move the gradient around. It is just a bad thing to do an example with. I'll do that as a solid filler. And then what I'll do is I will do a box that I do a gradient on, just so you guys get to see that. So if I want to do a gradient, first of all, I can just right click on it in the layer list or right click on it here and say send to back. That doesn't cover my text. You can also just like drag stuff around your layers, however you like. And then I can go over here to fill and see, now I can actually see the polars. I can change the angle of my gradient. And don't get too worried about making a gradient that's too crazy, because Figma actually has a way. So I grab the CSS to recreate that gradient built into the program, and it's pretty easy. So that's pretty low risk thing to do. If you're a lover of gradients, have a good time, enjoy. I'm not gonna tell you not to. Then I'll like. Keep that a little bit more transparent. So like I want to put a little gradient there, and I got my little box. And you have to close out of it, which is annoying, but so I got that now. And then the only thing I need to gather after this is my image, but I just am at the point where I don't want to do that right now. I'm gonna do it later, and that's fine. Cool. So like there's layer panel, there's the design panel, depending on what element you have selected, there's different like effects and stuff you can do. You can also add strokes to stuff, which is just like adding an outline. It'll get added as a border in CSS. There's some assorted effects here. Inner shadow and box shadow, drop shadow, those two first ones, those are fair game. The other two are really hard to implement CSS, so I don't recommend using them. But that same thing, Figma will output CSS for us to use later. Totally feel free to utilize those features. Also, when we're actually creating our sites that we need, like let's say you have an image you like made here in Figma. If you did, there's this option at the bottom to export. You can select a layer and then hit the export button, and I can then export my layer out as an image that I can then put into my website. So like, let's say you're really like, I'm obsessed with making the name of my website like this crazy gradient text that might be hard to make in CSS. It's not necessarily end of the road because we can export it out as an image and then just give it the alt text of whatever the text was. So you got options. How's that feel to everyone? Is everyone like excited to do design stuff in Figma? I'll also say this, if you have an idea of something, like if you're an illustrator and you like draw stuff, don't do that to yourself and try to draw in Figma. Just draw in Illustrator and you can paste your vector right in there or export it out as an SVG and import it into Figma. Totally fair game. And also if you're feeling lost or confused when you're working on mockups, you can always send me an email and I will do my best to answer it as promptly as I can. And that all the content I wanted to go over today. And I'm hoping we can go on break and then people who have open tasks that they're feeling confused about, I can help you with them. We got some people. I will, when I get back from break, tend to people on the Zoom first, just so that way they can like hang up and be done, if that's okay. And y'all can get a start on the homework for next week, which again is going to be the two things that we just did. And up until last, like it's, I think the first 3 lessons of Learn CSS is what I had to do last time. If you don't have that done, do it for next week, because next week we will start CSS. And if you don't know what I'm talking about at all, you're gonna have an unpleasant time. It's gonna be a hard class to follow along with if you've not looked at it yet. Because I tried to take what Code Academy does and license the foundation and build on it in the context of the project. That's the goal. But if you don't have the foundation, it's not a good way to build a house or learn a new thing. So we're gonna go break, come back at like 7:45. That cool, Zoom friends? And Zoom friends, if you don't have a question, you don't need help with anything, you can hang up and be done. If you want to just like on your own work on stuff.